Hey everybody, my name is Sarah Yakowanis, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Van Gogh inspired paper iris. And everything that I show you in this kit, except for the glue and the scissors, are going to be included in the kit. So you get all this beautiful petal paper with all that detail built right in. And you're also going to get all the wire and tape and everything that you need to make this flower, so you can get right to the good stuff, which is making beautiful paper flowers, which is really a thrill. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is cover a piece of wire in floral tape. And if you've never worked with floral tape before, it is very, very odd. It has almost no stick at all, which allows me to pull it out in big swaths like that. And the very little stick it does achieve is achieved by stretching it. So when you cover a piece of floral tape, a floral wire in floral tape, it's an action of stretching it with one hand and rolling it with the other, just like that. And this stem needs about 5 or 6 or 7 layers of floral tape. We really just want to bulk out this stem so that it looks like it could really handle carrying the flower that we're going to put on it. The blooms of these flowers are very large. They're very stylized and larger than life. So we really want this stem to look like it could conceivably hold it up, and to do that we're just going to layer that with 6 or 7 layers. And don't worry if a little bit of wire pops out at the tip. That's normal. Don't worry about it. And I think that looks good, so I'm going to put the wire and the tape aside for right now, and we are going to get out our first sheet of petal paper. And like I said, all these beautiful details are printed right on the paper, so you don't have to worry about like hand painting each one. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely less stressful than that, and you'll get just such a gorgeous bloom out of it. So the first thing we're going to do is cut out roughly on this dotted line. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think especially with this flower, any kind of little imperfections, especially when we get to like actually cutting out the actual petals, because this is just a rough cut, is going to be better than being precious and perfect with it. It's really just about getting these petals. And just like in a, Van Gogh painting, none of the flowers are alike in that painting, and your your arrangement is going to look way more realistic or way more true to the painting if you just kind of let your gut go with it. So now what I'm doing is I am folding on this fold line, and this is the only part of the kit, despite what I just said, that does need to be a little bit thought out and more precisely, just because this is a mirror image of that, so folding it right on the line will really help those petals stay together and come out better. And now we're just going to separate these petals. It looks like I need to get my scissors sharpened, but you should have a sharp pair of scissors. Scissors and glue are really the only thing, and I guess wire cutters are the only thing you need for to have at home, and the kit comes with everything else. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up that petal, and I have these wires already cut out. One of the steps in the kit is to cut out these wires, but there's a really handy little diagram that shows how long these should be. So right about there is good. And I have 6 of these cut out because these are going to be for the medium-sized petals and the large petals. That size wire works. So I have 6 of those. And I'm just going to load up my brush with some glue. And you don't want a lot of glue on this petal. Too much glue will make the colors in that paper bleed a little bit and like kind of distort their pigmentation. So just kind of a thin layer of glue, just like that. And that looks good. So I'm going to take my wire, and I like to go a little bit beyond the template, like that template line's right there, and I'm just going to go a little bit beyond it. And I'm also going to take a little bit of glue and put it right at that point, because on this petal and the small petal, which I'm going to show you next, that little point sometimes doesn't get as much glue as it needs because that wire is there. And now we're just going to fold it over. I like to take a little bit more time at the top, and then the rest of it really lays down perfectly. And now this is going to be a part that is going to give it that texture. And I'm actually going to try to zoom in a little bit on this so you can see it a little bit better. There. That should show it a little bit better. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently, and I'm sorry I hold my hand like this, it's just like how my hand goes. Like, I'm obviously, like, that's more intuitive, but this is the way that I do it, so I'm going to do it this way, but you can play around with it. And I'm just going to gently pinch this, kind of like in the same direction as those brush marks, just to give it that almost illusion that it is made out of paint. If you've ever seen a Van Gogh painting in a museum, you'll know how thick and beautiful all that paint texture is, and I really wanted to capture that in these flowers. So I think that looks good. You can kind of see how it's got a little bit of texture on there. And now we're just going to, and my nails actually rip the paper sometimes, and don't worry if that happens. It really won't make any difference at all. So now I'm going to zoom back out. And I'm going to set that aside to dry for 1 or 2 hours. And I have the 3 others, because each of these takes 3 medium petals, 3 small petals, and 3 large petals. So you have 9 petals altogether. So I'm just going to set those aside to dry for, like I said, 1 hour to 2 hours. And now I'm going to start my small petals. And just like the last step, we're carefully folding on this fold line. It's really the only thing you have to be like precious and careful about on these flowers, honestly. I don't really buy into that whole make it perfect crafting. I like to make things pretty, but I think the prettiness comes from that natural movement of the hand and how they, like, you know, in art school they called it evidence of hand, which is a fancy way of saying a little bit sloppy, but still really pretty. Now we're going to separate those 3. I'm going to set those aside. And we're just going to do 1. And actually I have 3 of a different size, because you only need 3 of this size. You need 6 of the other side that we used, but we only need 3 of that one. So I have those 3 all cut out, and like I said before, there's a diagram in the instructional booklets that show you exactly how long you want that wire to be. Now I'm going to, just like before, give it a thin layer of glue. My brush is way more loaded up now, so it's easier. And we're going to center that wire, and I'm just going to give this other side a little hit of glue just in case the wire blocks the glue from the other side. And now I am going to nudge that a little bit. I think that looks good. We're going to fold that over. Just like that. And I'll zoom in again so you can see. The pinching motion. And it's kind of, I like to use more of the pads of my fingers than my nails, because my nails actually end up ripping the paper pretty annoyingly. So I like to just use the pads of my finger, just like that. And it's just kind of like that motion, you know what I mean? And these ones don't need, the little ones don't need a ton of wrinkling, so I think that looks good. I'm going to set that aside to dry for 1 to 2 hours. And I've got these all ready to go and set aside to dry. And now we're going to do the large petals. The large petals are so big, they get their very own sheet of paper. And we're just gonna, again, fold on that fold line. Pretty simple. Once you get to the big ones, it should be second nature. Maybe you have to do a couple. But what I always like to say, especially to people who aren't artists and make a lot, even the most expert artists, honestly, don't do a very good job the first time they try something. You should always not feel bad if what you're making doesn't come out perfect the first time, because nothing ever comes out perfect the first time. Even for a professional artist like myself, you just have to stick in there. You have to trust your gut, that your gut said that you'd be good at doing it, and, you know, go for it. So now I'm going to open up this one. And we're using the wire from the medium-sized petals. They also worked for the large petals, so I only had to do 6 of those instead of doing 3 of 3 different lengths. And we're just going to load that up with some glue. Again, don't use too much glue because it will, the wetness in the glue will interact with that pigment on the paper if you use too much, but and now we are going to center that petal, center that wire right in the middle of the petal. And this goes pretty short of the end of the petal, but that's okay because we don't really need this part to be sculpted once we get to that part. You'll see. Now we're just going to gently fold that over. And one more zoom. And now we're just going to gently kind of look at the petal and see where the brush strokes are and add a little bit of texture on there because we're trying to recreate that beautiful texture that Van Gogh created all so long ago. I mean, I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that Van Gogh's paintings, some of the underlayers of paint are still not dry because he went so thick with it, and that's where all that beautiful texture and movement come from. So if you ever get a chance to see a Van Gogh painting, go out of your way to see it. You'll thank me. It's really a moving experience. So now we're going to zoom back out. And I have some more. And now we're going to cut out these petals. And cutting out the petals is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to do one of each shape, and I have some already cut out of all of the shapes, so I'm just going to do one. Of each of them for this video. Obviously cut out all 3 for your flowers. So we've got that one all cut out. And this, especially like I said before earlier in this video, cutting out the petals, really don't be precious with it. I mean, make sure all the white is gone, but you can cut into that color as much as you want. Really just kind of go with your gut, you know what I mean? It'll come out so much better if each petal is a little bit different than if they're all the same, because it'll look more like the painting. Because I can tell you, after staring at that painting for so long, not one of those flowers is the same. And I've got those all cut out. And you can see why we put the little hit of glue on the other side. I didn't do that on this one, and see how that's a little bit flapping. So I'm going to just hit it with a little bit of glue now and bond that to that wire. And the last one. I love these big giant petals. They're so pretty. I love all the petals, honestly. This was such a fun kit to develop and make, and I actually did it in the winter, which is fun because it's like really cold and blue outside, and it was cold and blue in my studio. It seemed like everything was like, just right. And we got these 3 cut out now. And we're gonna get back out our floral, we're gonna put away the glue, get back out our floral tape and wire. And start attaching these petals. So, the first thing you're going to do is sculpt these medium petals. And these are the only ones that get sculpted before you go on the stem. And it's a really easy sculpt. You just kind of press it against your finger that way and then bend it up like that. Just like that. It's pretty easy. You might take a little bit to get the hang of it exactly, but don't be precious with it. You know what I mean? Like, really, it's not a big deal. You can always rebend them and that kind of thing after you're all done. Perfect. So we've got 3 of those, and we're just going to attach these to the stem. And remember, the floral tape only wants to stick to itself and paper. So again, you're going to kind of position that petal. It's a little crooked. There we go. That seems better. Okay, so we're going to position that petal to the wire and just stretch that tape around it. And that's going to keep that petal so secure. And we're going to do the next one. And we want them kind of equidistant, which sounds like a finicky, sciencey term, but it's really not. It's pretty easy to get 3 petals equidistant on such a small wire. And now we're going to do the last one. Perfect. Now we're going to put it in the second petals. And the second petals, or the small petals, are going to go right in between the medium-sized petals. Just like that. We're going to secure that with a little bit of floral tape. And to save you from having to watch me tape all of these petals to the stem, I have one with all of the medium size, or the small petals all attached. So you see how they're just like right inside, like right in between each of those medium petals is a small petal. And now we're going to add these large petals on top of the small petals. So they're going to go right in between the medium petals as well. And there's not a ton of room, but it'll work. Just keep on nudging it and tweaking it. Just like that. And we're going to secure that to the floral tape. And remember, on these petals, there's usually a good side or a better side and a not as good side. And so with the medium petals, you want the better side facing out when you apply them to the stem. But the small and large petals, you want the best part to be facing in, because that, like, we're going to sculpt these out, so in is out eventually, if that makes any sense. I really hope it does. Okay, so I have all of these. I'm going to put the floral tape away for now. I have all of the petals all attached, so these large petals are on top of the small petals, and the medium petals have already been sculpted. So now we're going to sculpt these petals. So as you can see, I'm holding the small petal and the large petal together. And we're going to bend these down like that. And now I'm going to grab the tip of the small petal and bend it up like that. Separate them a little bit. I mean, you could tweak these forever if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think they look good just the way they are. So again, we're going to hold these two together and curve them down like that. And then we're going to take the tip, and actually, if you can see right there, the wire poked through a little bit, but that really doesn't matter at all. It'll happen occasionally. It's not a very often occurrence, but it happened on that one, so it will happen. And because we're pulling them up, it'll be fine. And the last one, we're going to hold this small petal and the large petal together. Scoop them down, take the tip like that, and bend it up. Just like that. You can play with it. It's pretty fun to play with that. And look at how good that looks already. So gorgeous. Now, I'm going to set that aside for right now because we are going to make what I call the neck pieces. I'm not sure what their official name is, but I call them neck pieces. Which is actually a really important part of an iris. There's so much life and character in the neck, especially of an iris. I think that any neck of a flower will really make the flower be better if you take extra time with it. But so what I did was these neck pieces come in a whole sheet, so I just cut out one strip. And now what I'm going to do is, and these are on a gorgeous vellum. I really, really love this vellum. It looks very floral to me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this vellum. And the reason why we roll it is because this paper has been flat its whole life. And we want it to know that it's going to be round for the rest of its life. So I rolled it one way, and I have actually found that it's easier to roll paper if you gently roll it like back and forth a few times. Like, look at how much tighter I can get that the second time. Because we're really just telling this paper it needs to be round now. And it'll go on your stem a lot better if it is round. Perfect. And I actually think that looks great. So I am going to cut out a few of these neck pieces. I'd say about 3 or 4 is the right amount for a flower, but you can do as many as you'd like. Just as long as you want that, you don't want too many because that's going to look weird, but too few will look weird too. So we're basically just cutting those out, and to save you from watching me cut out all those little neck pieces, I've got some all ready to go. And I am going to tilt out these petals a little bit, so I have room to work in this neck area. You can always bend them, or you should bend them back down when you're done and get back out that tape. So now we're just going to cover the bottom of this flower with these stem pieces, and it's going to give it a really elegant transition from this thick bulky top down to the thin stem. It's a really beautiful little detail. And that, of course, all the paper in this kit has all of that detail built right in, which is wonderful. Because I sweated the small stuff, so you can just do all the really fun part of making a paper flower, which is just, I think it's so much fun to make something so beautiful. In, probably, it takes me about an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, so you see how this one is a little bit too big for that. Like, I could bend it up into that petal, but I don't really want to do that. I want it to be down at the bottom, so I'm actually going to just trim this a little bit. And you can do that with any of these shapes, especially the longer ones. I built those so that if you need a long one to really cover some space, you can, but you can also trim them. So it gives you way more wiggle room. So that looks nice. I'm gonna add that on. And let's see. And it looks like I'm going to be able to do this one in 3. It's usually 3 or 4. And on this one, I do want it to go up onto that stem. I think that petal, I think that looks good. And it's going to give me a nice covering, all that white stem at the base of those petals. So I like that. So I'm going to add it right to it. But definitely, sometimes they take 3, sometimes they take 4, sometimes they take 5. There's plenty of pieces in this kit so that you can get a full coverage no matter where they end up landing. And there's actually a spot of white right there, so I'm going to add one more. This one does take 4. But you see, you never quite, the nature of floral tape is that you don't have 100% control over things 100% of the time. So there you go, just like that. And now we're just going to bend those back down and set that aside and set our tape aside. And now we have these wonderful stem strips. And these strips come in a sheet and you cut them, and it's always better to cut into the color and remove all white. The only, like, you can see how wonky these cuts are. Honestly, don't stress about cutting stem paper. It's like the least thing you should stress about. So I'm just going to cut off that tip of white. I'm going to bend these out one more time just so I can get a nice cover on it. And I am going to cover this stem. And stem paper will stick to this tape. It really doesn't seem like it should. And I've had a lot of students really doubt that it will. But once they do it, it's like magic. For some reason this tape sticks to this paper, or this paper sticks to this tape. So it's really just a matter of pressing it in. So you just want to press in and hold, like, so this side, this hand is pressing into that tape. This hand is gently holding that paper because this paper is super duper thin, so it will tear relatively easily. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if it does tear, don't stress about it. Just start again. Like, you don't have to take it all off and start again. Just where it ripped, start there again. And because this is just a half piece of stem wire, that's fine. I'm just going to end it with a little bit of tape, but on most of, like, on the wire that comes in the kit, you'll have much more length, which is why you should cut out, usually 2 will cover it, but sometimes you need a little bit more of a third stem strip, but I found 2 covers pretty well. And now I'm just going to take out my glue again and rub it in between my fingers, which I know is weird, but it's how I do it, so I'm going to show you. And now you're just going to give that stem a thin layer of glue. And you do this to make sure that it's going to stay exactly how you want it. I have found that if you like your flower exactly the way it is and you never want to sculpt it again, you maybe don't need to do this step, but if you want to do any kind of sculpting or adding it to a wreath especially, or any kind of heavy bending of the stem, just add a layer of glue and that stem paper will stay forever. If you don't and you bend it back and forth too much, sometimes it'll start to tear and come off. And now we are going to make some leaves for this flower. So the leaves come in these sheets of vellum, and the first thing we're going to do is separate them out. There's 3 leaves per page. I'll just do the first one. So now what we're going to do is carefully fold on this fold line and And it's the same reason why you're careful with all the other petals. It's a mirror image, so the closer you can get on that fold line, especially with the leaves, because the leaves are made out of vellum, which is a transparent paper, those little differences are going to really show up on the leaves, more so than even the petals, because the petals are opaque and this is transparent. So now we have that all done. And if I hadn't mentioned it before in this video, definitely you're going to want to make sure you work on a covered surface or a surface that'll wipe clean, because the petals will bleed a little bit onto the paper, and this vellum, the second glue hits it, really wants to curl. So you're going to get glue on your surface, so just make sure that it's covered. So now we're going to take our glue, and I've tried a couple of different ways of keeping this down while it's wet from the glue, and nothing really works. So I have just leaned into the fact that this paper curls. So you're just going to give it a thin layer of glue, and it will curl and kind of get on your surface. And there's not a lot of room, so you're just be okay with it getting on the surface that you're working on. Cover it with some brown paper like I have here, or make sure it's just a surface that'll wipe clean, because white glue isn't the hardest thing to get out. So now I'm going to center this wire, and this wire is a stem wire with just one layer of floral tape. And the reason why we put the floral tape on it is because metal doesn't really stick to anything, even glue. So being able to make sure that it's going to stick is a good, like the tape really helps it stick well. So now we're going to fold it over and smooth it out. We don't need to wrinkle these. And now what you're going to want to do is put this in a book for like 24 hours. I know a lot of things like say 24 hours and they don't really mean it, but glue and vellum need 24 hours to completely set. Basically what's happening is the glue, as it dries, is going to like minutely get a little bit smaller, and the fibers in this paper really just curl. So you definitely need to put this in a book for 24 hours. But right now I'm going to show you how to make a double leaf. And a double leaf is, the only reason why you'd really do it is if you want more length in your leaf. And so the first thing we're going to do to make a double leaf, and I like to have a nice mixture of double leaves and single leaves. I think it makes for a really beautiful arrangement to have like a varied number of like lengths of leaf for your arrangement. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just a triangle off the bottom of the one that we have going already. And the reason why we do this is because the eye is really drawn to right angles. It's just like something that's like human nature. So to cut that slit in there, like to make it go like that, the eye is less drawn to something like that, so it won't stand out quite as much, because you will kind of see through it. And now I am taking, this is just a piece of a leaf piece that I have already separated and folded. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just the top of this one. Just like that. And I'm going to open it up just like the other one. And I'm going to put a thin layer of glue on one side. Just like that. And now I'm going to take the leaf that we already have done, and I'm just going to position that onto the second leaf and fold that over again. Smooth it out and glue it. Just like that. And because this one didn't get any glue on that other side, we're just going to flip it around and pull back that part that didn't get any glue and give it some glue. And you should let this dry for 24 hours in a book, like a nice heavy book. I use my art history book because it's probably the heaviest book I own. You don't really get a lot of textbooks in art school, but in art history you do. Okay, so let's pretend that this has been sitting in a book for 24 hours. And then all you do is cut it out. So you just want to make sure none of the white remains. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then on the other side. And then you can, so we're pretending this has been in a book for 24 hours. You can go ahead and sculpt this however you'd like. That wire will really retain any kind of motion or movement that you give to the leaf. So I think that, let's give it a twist. I think that looks nice. And there you have it. That's how you do the Van Gogh iris and the Van Gogh leaf. And if you're interested in purchasing this kit, you can find a link at foldedpetal.com or itsy.foldedpetal.com. And I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for joining me.